What a great moment in time. I was thinking backstage about this moment, about all of us here to share and learn together. And it occurred to me that if you think of the history of the world, of all people who've ever lived, and of all the people that are on this planet right now, in other circumstances, we have to be among the most fortunate people to have ever lived. No question about it. That's not to say that we don't have struggles and difficulties, but we have so much privilege surrounding us, so much opportunity to be our best selves. And tonight I want to share with you what I've come to believe to be the single most important skill you can ever develop, inclusive of every skill in your life. I know that's a bold statement, but I hope you'll open your mind as I talk tonight and think about this. I'm going to talk about self-coaching. I like to think of self-coaching as the voice of your conscience, as the way that you might operationalize emotional intelligence and give a voice to your values and your priorities. I think it's the most important skill because of how many areas in your life it affects. It affects the way that you listen to people. It affects the feedback that you receive when somebody has something to say to you. It affects whether you put the grocery cart back in the corral, right? You know that. And at your best self, you go and put it there. And then there's the other you. My point is that you possess an ability to intentionally and purposefully guide yourself through challenge that you choose, adversity when it happens to you, fear, which is ever present in all of our lives, in invisible and small and giant ways, and temptation. And that if you learn to operationalize your self-coaching voice more frequently, you will be more effective, more happy, more loving, and more kind. You'll be collaborative in environments where you might have otherwise been competitive. You'll be more communicative. And most of all, you'll find that it activates your courage. When I talk about self-coaching, I think of it as an intentional, purposeful, outcome-driven objective. For me, the purpose of my self-coaching is to be my very best self in this moment, with my wife, with my kids, with my business partners, with my friends, with my clients. And I found that that pursuit, that objective, and then attaching my self-coaching purpose to that objective has been very useful to me. How many of you can think of a time in your life when you've had to be a great coach to yourself? Just by show of hands. Everyone knows about this. How many of you can think of an area in your life today where you could probably be a little bit better of a coach to yourself? I had to coach myself past the donut earlier today, right? So I'm going to talk about it in some big ways, but where it really shows up is in the small and intimate moments of your life. And it shows up in the way that you talk to yourself as well. So you know now I'm in the sports industry. We're in the youth and amateur and community-based sports field. We go and help improve the health and economic vitality of communities all over the world through sport. And I was having a conversation with a business partner of mine about self-coaching a few weeks ago, and he shared this story. And it went something like this. Player at the end of a practice goes to coach and says, "Sorry, coach, wasn't myself today." Coach looks at player and says, "Who are you kidding? You were exactly yourself on this day. The question is, what version of yourself are you going to bring tomorrow?" Now I imagine that player leaving that interaction. And you might think that at first he'd be defensive, but I doubt it. This guy is a winner. His objective is to win. I assure you he walked in that locker room and looked himself dead in the eyes in the mirror. The next morning as he came to practice, I assume that as he got in the state of mind that's required for this level of play, he looked himself in the mirror again and said, "You go do this. You bring it today. Better than yesterday." Or any other phrase that would have helped him to change his state of mind. You can apply self-coaching in so many different ways to create energy, to create calm, and you know you do this. But the interesting thing about this, all of you raised your hand. How many of you have spent 10 minutes improving upon or working on this skill? Most of us haven't. And that's what I want to awaken you to tonight. An awareness that you possess already an ability to coach yourself, that this skill is vitally important to every area of your life, And if you will operationalize it, if you'll be intentional about it, you can do extraordinary things. I know a lot about self-coaching. And I often say I learned the most valuable lessons of my life before I was 16, because at 15, just 2 days shy of my birthday, my father died. And that event liberated me from the abuse that I suffered at his hands for so many years. From the time I was about 6 years old, when he would lose control, he would drag me into a room where I experienced long and torturous events that no child should ever experience. Mind you, this is at the hands of the man who, had I been so lucky, would have loved and protected me. In the worst of one of those events, I was 9 years old, and I recall laying there. He was shirtless. He had a belt wrapped around his hand so that he could hit and punch, and a cigarette in the other. And I remember being just tormented. He would pause and wait and smoke. I assure you, I whimpered. I begged for mercy. I cried. I dreamed about being out of that room. And at one point, I just started to say, I won't be like him. I will never be like you. I knew it was evil. I will be good. I will be kind. I will be strong. I'm going to live an extraordinary life. And as he pummeled me, I thought, I will be good. I will be kind. I will be strong. I'm going to live an extraordinary life. It was the only way for me to have power over him, to be right and righteous and good, to triumph over him, not in that moment, because that wasn't possible, but with the rest of my life. I got reprieve from that abuse the night he died. He went into a hospital on a Thursday with pancreatic problems, and by Saturday he was gone. And I will never forget that night. I walked out of the hospital. I came down the 7th floor, and we were in Maryland. I went out to the car on that starry night, the most triumphant night of my life, and I thought, you did it. You made it. You made it. Now go live an extraordinary life. I did not know what that meant at the time. I didn't understand what it meant, but I knew it was my definition of success, to live something extraordinary, to be good, to be kind, and to be strong were with me, those promises. And my self-coaching was centered around that. Time went on. When I went to school, I studied psychology at the University of Maryland, and I had this theory that I could outweigh in the seesaw of my life the bad memories by overproducing good memories. I'd always been an outdoors person and a climber and so on and so forth. And I went and I took an Outward Bound course that proved to be extraordinarily transformational for me. Living in an environment, achieving things every day, being outward bound. Outward bound means to be prepared for the unknown. When a ship leaves harbor, and the Outward Bound as a school was equipping me to be outward bound. But I learned all of these skills there, climbing and mountaineering and running rivers and all kinds of things that meant I could say yes to every adventure that came my way. And we did exactly that. We climbed all over the world. We summited mountains where it was 40 degrees below zero and a 30-mile-an-hour windstorm at midnight, me and my climbing partner, Jim. We did all kinds of things. We climbed in Vietnam, in Thailand, all over Asia, the American West. We summited the highest active volcano in the world in Ecuador. And through those experiences, I was able to fill my life with evidence that I was strong, that I was capable. And that self-confidence that I got from that had propelled me into all kinds of things. His death and the freedom from him was such a liberation to me. And I had been, and one thing I know is I was always a good coach to myself. But on Devil's Tower, on this one particular day, I discovered something about my self-coaching abilities that I didn't know. I discovered that it could produce joy. So we went out to Devil's Tower. Devil's Tower is an 867-foot remnant of an ancient volcano. And it's got these columns that you climb up. That's me on one of the lower pitches. We climbed a route called the Durance route. It was Jim and I alone. We got up early, This climb was well within our skill set. It was well within our comfort zone. But still, when you're 400 feet off the deck and you're placing gear, it's a very serious environment. The consequences of an injury in that environment or a fall are significant. So it's a serious endeavor. But I recall being about 400 feet off the deck, looking around and thinking, enjoy this. Wow. Which is, by the way, exactly what I said to myself as I walked on this stage tonight. And then the climb itself, I was climbing, and there was warm air now rising up in this column, and it was like I was flying. Placing gear so effortlessly, putting safety protection in, continuing up that climb. And I thought to myself, you got this. You got this. And then I started to say it out loud. You got this. You got this. Enjoy this. It was one of the most pleasurable adventures of my life. Not the highest, not the most difficult, not the most arduous, and it didn't prove very much to me other than that I could fall in love with a moment by shifting my attitude and focusing on that objective. You all have this same power within you to activate this voice that you already use in a more intentional way. The difference between playing with this skill as a skill and doing what you might do right now is that what you do right now is automatic. And I'm asking you to pause and listen to how you coach yourself. Listen to what you're saying to yourself. And if you will do that and you'll commit yourself to something greater than just that moment, to the pursuit of you at your very best, your self-coaching voice can do amazing things, not just for you, but for so many other people. It's important to define the win. Be good, be kind, be strong, an extraordinary life. Enjoy this. And following that, then you can coach yourself to those things, those objectives. For the purpose of tonight, I want you to think about your win as you at your very best self. The pursuit of you at your very best, so that you can attach your self-coaching voice to that objective. In your most intimate conversations, in the way that you listen to one another, in the way that you show up at home and choose to be present. I say to myself before I get home, because we're busy and we have a lot going on, I drive into the driveway, I check my email, I turn off the phone, and when I walk in, I say to myself, be here now, be here now. And as the night goes on and my mind wants to go to a spreadsheet or some other thing, be here now, Dev. This is it. This is the moment. When I talk about you at your very best, I have this theory. I have this theory that most of us operate at somewhere between maybe 60, maybe 70% of our best self. So I don't have any scientific proof of this, but let's just assume we hover somewhere in here and that we peak up to our best selves, most of us, in certain situations, in situations that give us great feedback, right? Easy for me to be my best self if I've got an audience of employees and we're getting ready to do something great and we've just done a grand opening of a facility or some such thing. But can I be at my best self when I'm tired on a Wednesday night and the house is full of chaos, as all of our homes are on a Wednesday night when you got kids to get ready for school? Can I be there? So in the pursuit of your best self, if most of us operate at that 60 to 70% and we believe that we should peak and then valley, I want to challenge that. First of all, if you're at 60 to 70% on a regular basis, that means when you're tired, when you're hungry, when you are stressed, you're down here at 40 or 50% or whatever number might be. And if the stress is really on, you might sink to something lower than that. I'm saying to you, you don't have to peak and valley like that. If you would commit yourself on a regular basis to focusing on being your best self, and you operationalize this voice of your conscience, if you will put to work the voice of your values and allow yourself to become a great coach to yourself, amazing things can happen. Helen Keller said, life is a daring adventure or nothing at all. I'm certain she was right. I want to invite you to think about your responsibilities, your relationships, your opportunities as a daring adventure. And if you'll do that and you'll commit yourself to the pursuit of your very best self, And you'll start listening to what your automatic language is and replace it with the language of the best coach you've ever known. Great things can happen. If you're a spouse who's not partnering well, coach yourself. If you're a leader who's not really leading, coach yourself. If you are stuck and need to make a change, coach yourself. Choose to do this more proactively. And if you're a parent or a spouse who's doing harm to somebody, dear God, coach yourself. The best in you is waiting for the coach in you to speak up. Thank you.